welcome to Wellness in the Wilderness. Come with us on the trail of life as we inspire you to take a step outdoors, to disconnect from the distractions and reconnect with yourself. Sydney Williams and her guests will motivate you to get active and get well. Now, here is Sydney.
Welcome to Wellness in the Wilderness. I'm your host, Sydney Williams, author and founder of Hiking My Feelings. And today I am broadcasting live from Lafayette, California, the ancestral lands of the Miwok, Bay Miwok, Yokut, and Muwekma Ohlone people. In this mini season, sponsored by Sawyer Products, we're celebrating 5 years of Hiking My Feelings by sharing conversations with 5 women who have been incredibly inspirational or somehow instrumental in this journey so far. My guest today is Liz Thomas, who is a professional hiker, adventure conservationist, and outdoor writer who broke the women's self-supported speed record on the 2,181-mile-long Appalachian Trail. Considered among the most experienced hikers in the U.S., she's known for backpacking fast, light, and solo. Liz has hiked more than 20,000 miles on 20-plus long trails, including completing the Triple Crown of long-distance hiking, which includes the Appalachian, Pacific Crest, and Continental Divide Trails, and first known traverses of the Chinook Trail in the Columbia River Gorge and the Wasatch Range in Utah. Her book, Long Trails: Mastering the Art of the Thru-Hike, is the winner of the National Outdoor Book Award for Best Instructional Book. And honestly, I could fill this entire episode giving you tidbits of things I've heard about Liz, stories Liz has told me, things I find inspirational about this woman, but then that would kind of defeat the purpose of having a conversation. So in the spirit of keeping this mile-long list of accomplishments to a digestible short few sentences, let's go ahead and welcome Liz to the show. Liz, hi!
Thank you so much for having me on, Sydney.
Oh, it's so great to have you back. And guys, we are keeping it real here. We've got Liz, we've got birds, we've got outdoor sounds. We are finding our wellness in the wilderness as we go. So I just want to take a few seconds before we jump right in and just let people hear the beauty that surrounds you. So here we go. All right. Hey, bird friends. So Liz, are you ready to have a great day? How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I just got back from Scotland 2 days ago. I was on a thru hike there and I'm feeling re-energized, just super excited to be home, but also so grateful for the time I had on my trip.
Oh, I love that. And I hope we can get into Scotland here in a little bit. I think before we jump into stuff, so we had Liz on the Virtual Campfire podcast back in the day. She was actually on the first episode that aired after we brought it back. And we were talking about poop stories with Taylor and Thor from Do Good Shit. And now we're here to talk about wellness in the wilderness and take a little bit of a different spin on this conversation with Liz and understand a bit about what makes you you, how you got into everything that you've done, and how this is just all unfolding for you. And so I think where I'd love to start, in the spirit of this being 5 years and 5 conversations with iconic and incredible folks like yourself, when I think back on Hiking My Feelings, I've always had a vision, and I have a very distinct memory of the vision expressing itself, which was like big, huge poster-sized Post-it notes on a wall, and just like, I want to do a book, and I want to go on tour, and I hope there's a documentary or a movie made about this life someday. And I never knew in that moment, like I didn't know how it was going to get done. I didn't know you, like I didn't know who would help us along the way in the pursuit of this vision, but I trusted that those things would show up. When I was clear on the what, like what is Hiking My Feelings and why do I care about it, the trust of how and who just kind of has always followed. So when I think about your long list of achievements, and even going back before you did everything that you've now done, all the notches on your belt, all the experience, 20,000 plus miles hiked around the world now, was any of this on your radar as a possibility? Like, did you set forth with some grand vision and just start ticking the boxes? Or like, how did this unfold for you, this life you're living?
That's a great question, Sydney. I think especially when I was growing up, I felt like I didn't have a lot of like role models doing this sort of thing because like who was like through hiking is kind of like it's been happening for a while, but it's also kind of a newer thing. So as soon as I first found out about the long trails, I was like, that's something I want to do. And I didn't use the giant post-it notes. I used like note cards, but I set out like, hey, I want to finish the Triple Crown by the time I'm 25. I want to be an editor for Backpacker magazine. I want to write a book. And it was very much so the similar thing. And it's funny because I still have all of those old note cards. And when I wrote them down, I was like, I don't have any, how is this going to happen? And then now when I look at the ones from like 2012 or something, I'm like, huh, I guess I did that. So I think manifesting those sorts of dreams and goals really early on, even when they seem very pie in the sky, was essential to getting to where I am.
It's really refreshing to hear you say that, because in my mind, like, I've romanticized this journey for myself, but also like I think as a society we look at people that have achieved some kind of success, and it varies by industry and age and time of existence in the spectrum of history. But I think like as a society we like latch on to this person has achieved this thing that we've deemed to be successful, and then we like dissect the path that person took without ever really considering whether or not that path would be accurate for us. You mentioned that there wasn't like through hiking has been happening, but it hasn't really been at the forefront of conversation, and there wasn't a lot of representation, as it were. So what helped you get from I've got these ideas, I wrote them down. I love that you still have your note cards. That makes me so happy, because I have my little like post-its like rolled up in storage, because someday when I'm famous people will give a shit and they'll pay big money for it. Anyway, like what helped you get from writing it down to these big long lists? And like feel free to pick like a thing and kind of walk us through that journey, because I think that there's the seeing and the witnessing of the celebration of the accomplishment, but there's never really like a full exposure or conversation or understanding of the steps it took to get there. So I'd love to hear how you broke down some of those things into more manageable steps that ultimately led to these like incredible experiences and accomplishments.
Yeah, I think, one of the really good examples that I think about all the time is the project that I've been working on right now, which is Treeline Review. It's an outdoor gear review website for everyone. One of our goals is I really wanted to create an outdoor gear review site that had representation, that had writers who are people of color, LGBTQ, the sort of outdoor gear experts that I wasn't seeing in mainstream outdoor media. It's a sort of thing where like I had this vision and I didn't really know how to get there. And so part of that was a lot of research, talking to people, getting opinions, and also knowing what my own weaknesses were. So I'm not like an accounting kind of person. I'm not a bookkeeper. So really reaching out and partnering with people who had those skill sets that were not my forte.
That almost feels like an offensive answer, Liz, if I'm being honest, because I'm over here, I'm like, I'm doing the most, I'm wearing every hat. Like I am, as I hear you say this, I'm recognizing that I am aware of my weaknesses, but I also have this like borderline sadistic need to prove to myself that I can do it. I have no desire to crunch numbers. I do not like doing accounting. But there's some part of me that's like, well, you better know every aspect of your business. Otherwise, are you really running it? Is it really yours? And like, I admire you for just knowing your weaknesses, and tell me what it's like to not have to prove to yourself that you can do every role of business. I have a feeling, a sneaking suspicion, that's why Treeline is as successful as it is, because you have pulled in so many incredible partners to help you along the way.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely an art of letting go, and also entrusting people, knowing that, like I could figure it out, but if I trust people, if I work with them, I'm going to build something that's a lot stronger. And it's the same sort of thing with like setting these big goals for backpacking too. If I'm willing to I don't have to look up what time every post office is open in every trail town to get my resupply package. Chances are someone's already done that. So really like trusting the universe that that the right people will be able to help where I need it.
Isn't that beautiful? And have you found, like, has that always been an innate quality that you have? Or is that something that as you spent more time in nature, where in the best wilderness spaces, in the most well-managed, protected spaces, like everything is working together? Like, because for me, I have come to realize through spending time outside that in fact, when it's a single species that's been like like if they've like done like a clear cut and they're like, we're only going to put one kind of tree in here, like those trees look sad because they don't have all their friends. So like, tell me about that. Is this something you've always had, or did this come out more expressed through your time in nature?
Yeah, I definitely think nature helped. I think, when I first started hiking, I was the type of person who would like have every spreadsheet and every sort of worst case scenario picked out. And the longer that I hiked, the more I realized, hey, if I'm flexible, if things get weird, it'll still end up working out. On a long trail, we talk about how the trail provides, and it's uncanny how many times I've like lost a bite valve to my platypus, and then like 10 miles later find a new one, and we're like, what is going on? So there's some sort of like magical something that like wants me to succeed.
I love that. And I think that it's a cool opportunity to marry all the things that we're learning. Like for what the thing that comes to mind as I hear you describe the trail providing and just kind of like, I guess, surrendering to the magic that is the outdoors, and in the specific case of long distance hiking, trail magic. But the thing that I think of is like how at one point I found myself in a forest and I was like, I know I'm not the first person to have this thought, but I was like, you know what's cool about being out here? These trees don't give a shit what the other trees look like. Like, we're not out here talking shit about that one's trunk or that one's branches or the color of the leaves. Like, I'm just appreciating. And I think that when we find those moments, whether it's like not judging our bodies because trees don't judge each other, or surrendering to this magical bivalve that just happens to show up at the exact right time, I think that there's something really beautiful to be said for the capacity to have that awareness, to be able to articulate it, because like we can feel these things, but like to find the words that mirror the experience, but also to like take that off the trail and into life out here in the front country. Have you found that to be true for yourself? And are there any specific stories where you're like, oh, I can see how this skill that I've acquired outside is now translating to something like running tree line?
Oh yeah, definitely. My hiking partner, long distance hiking partner turned business partner, Naomi Huditz, who is also the co-founder at Treeline Review and is much better at numbers than I am. We talk a lot about how there's no way we could do this had we not been through hikers. Through hiking, being outside has forced us to be flexible, has forced us to be creative in all sorts of ways. I think, as far as bringing things in from the trail into the front country, one of the things I think a lot about is after going on my first long distance hike, like many through hikers, I went through sort of a phase of post-hike blues. Some people call it post-hike depression, though I prefer to use blues since depression is a serious mental health challenge. But I think one of the things that has really helped me, the more hikes I do, address that is how can I bring those ideas from a long distance hike into my day to day?
I love that. And I mean, obviously, clearly I relate. I went on a 5-day hike across an island and I turned my entire life into the lessons that I've learned. So I get that deeply. From a newbie perspective, if there's anybody out there that's listening that's coming into this from a different angle, maybe we're not trying to convince them that long distance is for them, maybe they've already done one, for anybody that's out there that may be experiencing post-trail blues because, you know, last year they did the PCT and now they're seeing all the people posting about it, whatever it is, do you have any recommendations for how to go about not only finding those lessons, because that, I mean, like, self-reflection is not easy. A lot of us run from our feelings and the opportunity to reflect and integrate. Do you have any tips for like how to extract a lesson and then bring it into your daily life?
Yeah, I think, one of the things you were talking about beauty and how trees don't judge how we look. And I think that's a really great example of one of the lessons where, like, coming back to the front country, just taking the time to be like, trees don't care. And when I was out there, I was so happy because I wasn't bathing at all, and I wasn't ever brushing my hair. I think that's a really key example. I think also, when we're on trail, it's so easy to be open and build community. And so that's a reminder that, like, hey, when I'm in the front country, maybe I need to take some extra effort to build a community around me, because that was something that really made me feel alive on trail. I think the same can be said for moving our bodies in any ways that we can. Some of the things that just kind of inherently happen on a thru hike, turns out, like, the way we've built our society and our infrastructure doesn't automatically set us up for those sorts of things that can make us feel happier. So just being mindful of that as we're going about our daily life.
Yes, so true. My God, I was like, I have nothing to add. That's a period, and I affirm and echo. So one of the other folks that I interviewed for this season is Gail Straub from She Explores. And before my interview with her, she had shared this article with me that Rachel Cargill recently posted. And she was talking about how we've turned forever, air quotes, into the only acceptable definition of success. And it got me thinking about my journey with Hiking My Feelings, and how our dream has morphed and changed. One, as a result of a global pandemic. Like, we were getting people outside and getting them off their devices, and then we had to do a complete 180 and figure out how to make our programming accessible online. But it's morphed and changed from outside forces, from inside forces. Like, I have dropped things that I started doing and started doing things that I hadn't done yet, just as a function of living and breathing life into this dream and into myself, as it were. In terms of backpacking and hiking, no trail goes on forever. Like, the Appalachian is 2181, the Pacific Crest Trail. It's got a start and an end. But there is one trail that goes on until it ends completely, and that's like our trail of life. So I'd love to talk about, like, what do you think about forever as this only metric of success? Like, have there been failed, air quotes, failed successes along your journey that you've had in this lifetime?
Yeah, definitely. And, I read that Rachel Cargyle post as well, and was, really, it gave me a lot of things to think about in terms of failed success. And, one thing that came to mind that was actually kind of painful, but the post helped me. I'm still, like, working through it, is kind of my relationship with FKTs, fastest known times. I as you mentioned in the bio, I had the fastest known time for the Appalachian Trail. And I had several other attempts at fastest known times, including a John Muir Trail fastest known time that I thought I had broke, and then realized maybe 4 months later that I broke the self-supported record, not the unsupported record. And I was like, oh my gosh, I took a 2-hour nap and I could have had this record. And it really, like, kind of made me think about all of these, like why am I doing this? And I think in the end, I got to this point where I realized, like, I don't need this external validation. I don't need to compete with others to feel like my time out there is awesome and valid, and I'm an awesome and valid person. And so, people are still like, hey, what's your next FKT? And like, I think to them, it probably looks like that was a failure to not keep doing FKTs. But to me, I feel like it was like an evolution of, like, I got what I needed out of this search for FKTs.
Ooh, all right. I like where this is going. Okay, so failed successes on my end, things that I think about. I think in some ways, my life is a failed success. Like, I'm still here. but there's so much that like, I mean, I like truly, I think if I was in a different mindset and if I lived my life in a different way and I reflected on all the stops along the way, everything that doesn't currently exist would be technically a failure. And that doesn't feel good to me. And I don't think that I'm like over indexing on positivity here. But like an example for me, top of mind, is moving to Catalina and moving off Catalina. Like, I thought this is the best ending to the story that I've already written, that I've been living, which is my first book. And if we're talking about like the prettiest bow on that particular story, and mind you, like, my experience with hiking is like one section of my life. It's the most forward public facing section of my life, but there's a lot of things I care about outside of hiking. And so for me, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to move to Catalina. This is like the best ending to this story. And then I got there and I wasn't happy. And it took me like 5 months to understand my unhappiness and to stop rationalizing that this was the dream. So why am I not happy? Like, it took me waking up one day in mid-April and Barry was like, hey, so you've been waking up crying more than you've woken up happy. Like, we should think about this and maybe make some different decisions. And it wasn't until I had him say that to me where I was like, oh, and I snapped out of it. Now, I think, I know, I don't even have to say, I know one of the reasons that I was so resistant to admitting that I wasn't happy was like, I moved my whole life to that island. What are people going to think? Am I an irresponsible business person? Like, did I make a bad decision? Did I not know enough to do this? Like, am I throwing away the best opportunity ever because it's not working out the way I thought it should? Like, is it actually better? No, it's not. Okay, great. And it was just a lot of questioning and a lot of, frankly, like a lot of concern of what other people would think. And like, why does that matter? Because I am clearly physically unhappy. Have there been any instances like that? Like, is any of that relatable to you as it pertains to, for the sake of keeping with the example of FKTs, was there ever a part of that where you were like, oh my God, what are people going to think if I don't make this? Or is that just not part of your process when you were in pursuit of those?
Yeah, I think, with my first FKT on the Appalachian Trail, I wasn't actually that concerned about what other people were thinking. I feel like the drive to do that one came from like this deep spot in my heart, and that was what was driving me. And because I had already hiked the Appalachian Trail before, getting to see it again with new eyes, I was always excited about what was around the next turn. And, with my other FKT attempts, it didn't feel that way. It felt much more like numbers based, which, as we already talked about, not my favorite thing. It felt much more like I was doing it for this show, for this audience. And I think, that really taught me something about like, hey, if it's coming from my heart and that's what's driving me, that's usually a really good indicator that this is on the right track, even if it's something that's like really pie in the sky.
I love that. And I think I also would just like to acknowledge both of us for being total badasses and going for it when we don't know how or who it's going to happen. Because like, I take this part of me for granted, and I don't know if you can relate to this, but like, I assume that everybody is aware of the dream that they have and is working towards it. Apparently that's not true. Like, apparently it takes a ridiculous amount of courage and bravery and self-awareness, and sometimes, just in my case with my first attempt at the Trans-Catalina Trail, delusional confidence that I could. Is that true for you too, or am I missing the mark here? Because like, I assume that, and I, to the point where it's like, it's harmed relationships for me, where I just assume, I'm like, I see the best in you. I hear you say what you want, but then you're not going and doing anything about it. Like, what is it? Is there something like, were you born with this trait? Are we born with this trait? Do we learn how to go do this? Like, what separates people that have big audacious dreams, who don't know how they're going to get there or who's going to help make it possible? What separates those of us that think this way and live this way from folks that don't? And not like, I'm not trying to make this a positionality thing, like we're better because, but like, what are some of these things that make it so that we can just go with nothing but delusional confidence and like go attempt something so huge.
I love that term delusional confidence, because when I look back on some of my early decisions that I made that have led me to this path, I'm like, I did what? I moved across the country and didn't have anything lined up and didn't have, and I think that's so much of like trusting this is going to work out, because it's really important that it works out. To answer your question, I think what makes me different maybe is that my mom would say it's like stubbornness and refusal to do what she tells me to do. Which I think especially like, growing up in a Japanese American household was like, my mom had a really, really hard time with that. And I think the funny thing is my grandma who lives in Japan looks at my life and she's like, you're living my dream. And to hear that, I know, isn't that so touching? To hear that, like I wrote a guidebook to waterfalls, and my grandma loves waterfalls, and she loved hiking when she was more mobile. And she's like, this is what you're doing is incredible. And I wish I could have done it. And so to hear that sort of thing, like, even though everything has been, it seems like, how did this get all lined up? It wasn't a clear path. To hear that, it makes it feel like it's totally worth it.
Oh, I love, man. It got my heart with the grandma comment. I'm like, oh God, I just love it on so many levels, like from a just a human to human thing, but also just like the capacity for you to be able to do what you're doing, and the path that the trail that you're blazing for other women of color and other just adventurers that want to go do cool stuff. This is it when we're in it, like when we're in this industry, I guess, like I don't work for an outdoorsy brand, but I guess we are in the outdoor industry. It's kind of hard to remember that this isn't the default for everybody. So it's nice to hear that, and nice to reflect on that with you, and like just imagine the joy your waterfall loving grandmother must feel on like a daily basis because you're doing all this cool stuff. Another thought that I was thinking as it pertains to going and doing these things and just going for it is I just completely lost my train of thought. So there's that. And when I wake up at 3 a.m. and remember the question I was going to ask you, it's going to be great. But so if we go back to the trusting ourselves and trusting the universe and trusting other people, and how that, like, it starts with us, right? Like we have to have that for ourselves in order to be able to let some of this stuff go. Like, I don't like numbers, I should probably hire somebody. Have you felt like that self-trust and self-awareness has been innate and natural to you, or is that something that you've had to overcome or work for or fight to embody? Because it sounds to me like this is just how you're wired, and maybe it is that simple, but are there any stories or instances or experiences that have given you the capacity to know yourself that well and to trust that you can do this?
Yeah, I think that's so nice that you're like, oh, maybe you've always been like this. I don't think that's true at all. One of the best things, though, is I think the more times that I do something that's like out there, the more times I'm like, oh, wait, that worked out last time, so maybe it's okay to take another jump. And I think, with the Appalachian Trail FKT, doing something, I just come off the Continental Divide Trail, which, like bears and lightning storms and river fords, and there was no trail really when I did it. It was just like all these things. And so to come from that and be like, I did that one. All right. So maybe an FKT on the Appalachian Trail is not such a big jump. I think, they kind of build on each other and help us build confidence.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that's like, I really try to not get lost in the metaphors and the parallels between life and hiking, but you can't help it. Like when you've been impacted by anything, and I'm sure that there's people that fly fish that are going around spouting about fishing in rivers the way I talk about trails and mountains, but there's something so, I guess, primal, like the core of being a mammal, like not even human, where it's like we're so separated from nature that we ourselves forget that we are nature. And I know that the more time I spend outside, the more connected I feel to everything, the and the more that I realize that that everything that I thought mattered and everything that I've been conditioned to believe is important or that I should care about or that I should strive for doesn't actually matter. And so I'm curious, like in the 20,000 plus miles you've spent on the trail, what initially drew you in to all of this? Like like you're like a through hiking legend, Outside Magazine said, like you've had like some really nice and complimentary things said about you and your career outdoors by some pretty like authoritative positions or people in positions of power on the subject who are like, they know. How, like, what drew you in and what keeps you coming back? Because 20,000 miles is a lot of miles. So why do you keep doing it, and what got you here in the first place?
Yeah, I think like a lot of thru hikers, I started with this sort of idea of like a thru hike was gonna like prove to myself that I was hardcore and I could do hard things. Like every 21-year-old is looking to do. And I think the more that I do it, it's like the complete opposite of like I go out there so like I can be quiet and I can like calm my mind and like just kind of like exist in a space with I think a lot about this term. Like I also do a lot of yoga, and I think, yoga is all about mind body. And for me as a hiker, it's all about mind body place. And just kind of like feeling like I'm this being walking through a landscape. So it's gone from a very like ego-centered sort of thing to almost like this like I want to completely erase my ego from the landscape.
I love that. We're going to come out here and bag peaks and crush miles and just like rack it up. I'm going to just absolutely destroy this trip, but like not. And I think, oh man, I really love the mind body place part, because like I'm processing in real time, so this might take a while, but like I have always like I have a very distinct moment where I was like, if mind and body are like these things, this like cables or something, like it gets plugged in or they get attached or they like reconnect, like we're Avatar, we're plugging into the source tree, whatever. Like I have all these like visuals of like what that moment was and like what was happening. And for me, it was on the Trans-Catalina Trail. But mind body place, like I've always talked about that mind body moment in the context of the place, but I hadn't stopped to consider that place is so integral to it that it is mind body place. It's not just like, so this one place gave me mind body. It's like, no, like it's because of the place that mind body was possible. I'm going to need to sit with that for a few minutes, and I'm probably not going to come back to it on this episode, but just know that my wheels are turning and I've got a takeaway that I don't know what to do with yet. But are there things that have happened in your life? Like, I know I'm not the only person that goes out on the trail and processes, but like if you started with like, I'm going to go crush this because I'm in my early 20s and this is what early 20s people do. Let's go get this through hike. I'm going to slay. And then you're coming back and you're like, it's a much more grounded, much more rooted, much like even just the way I articulate it, like my voice is slowing down as I talk about it. I'm like putting myself in that place. And like, this is how I experience the outdoors. Have there been moments when we think about place where it's like mind body, like do you also have like these mind moments if you like think back on your life and your career in the outdoors where you're like, this was a place that was pivotal for me because I discovered this about myself, or I came to realize some big profound thing about life on this path? Like are there places that you go that hold like a sacred meaning for you that you revisit because they were so profound in those kinds of life moments?
Oh yeah. And this one's gonna like kind of make heads like twist even more because one of the things that was pivotal to me was going from long distance hiking in nature to going to urban long distance hiking, which kind of throws this whole mind body place thing like I would say it throws it out the window, but like it kind of like goes into a different dimension of like, what does it mean to be connected to my mind and body when I'm in an urban environment? And I think going back to that idea of like things the trail teaches you, that urban hiking taught me to find beauty wherever I am and to find nature wherever I am, and to kind of like narrow my focus to where those spots of beauty are.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Obviously, because you've repeated some trails, like you've through hiked a couple or a handful or maybe more than that of these trails more than once. Like I know the AT in particular. Are there, like, when you are considering an upcoming adventure, like you've been known for a fastest known time on a trail you've already completed, and you've also been somebody to like do the first traverse of a range. So what is it about those different opportunities? And if we think about all the different ways that you can experience a long distance hike, whether that's in a brand new place that you've never been before, that maybe other humans haven't, like we know that humans probably have, but like hasn't been recorded. First person ever that we know of, to urban, like that's a very wide spectrum of experiences. What is it like? What are the kinds of things that are attractive to you about those different kinds of environments? And do you seek out different kinds of environments to have different kinds of experiences when you're going out into nature?
Yeah, I think, with the urban, one of the things I love about urban is it's so easy to talk with others about the benefits of hiking, and really open up the minds of a lot of people who are like, oh, I'd like to go hiking. I like the idea of hiking, but I don't like mosquitoes or bears or whatever. So that's something I really, really enjoy about the urban experience, is sort of the social aspect. And then as far as like, there's joy to be had from hiking a trail I already know, and reflecting on like how I've changed as a person. And there's joy in going out on a mountain range no one has recordedly traversed, and being like, I have no idea what's going on. This is really scary. Like, yeah, like kind of that sort of unknown. So, I think, as you said, like it just kind of depends on what sort of experience I'm looking for.
Oh, that's so neat. And I that's one of the reasons why I was excited to have you on this very special mini season celebrating 5 years of Hiking My Feelings, because it was after learning about you and your experiences both on rugged wilderness, the most picturesque trails you can possibly think of when you think of like the beauty of the outdoors, and for all the reasons that you just said about urban hiking. Like Liz Thomas is the inspiration for our Take a Hike Diabetes campaign. I was like, okay, so I had my experience out in the middle of nowhere on an island, and that was cathartic, and all the reasons why it was, because there was nobody else out there. I could let it rip. I could cry. I could, do whatever I needed to do. I could like almost poop my pants and not have the whole town see it because I wasn't on the side of the street. Like I had that. And then I got curious. I was like, okay, that's awesome. But like, what if you don't have access to that? Like, what if you can't get to a state park? What if you can't get to a national park? What if that requires an airline ticket or a multi-day drive, and you are working a job or multiple jobs, or you have kids and you can't take time off work? Like, there's so much about the romantic side of wilderness that excludes people just for the sheer fact of the geographic location. So when I heard about this concept of urban hiking and how you had done it and all the reasons why you loved it, it was in tandem with this Take a Hike Diabetes campaign. And we had already talked about, like, I already had the awareness of the Chicago Outer Belt, but it wasn't until like through speaking with you and understanding some of the things that you've experienced on the urban side of things, where I was like, oh, well, like now I'm curious, like, is it possible for me to feel the same way I feel in the middle of nowhere on a rail to trail project? Is it possible for me to feel the same way that I feel on an extremely difficult hike? Because for me, at the beginning of my journey, the harder the better, because the harder it was, the more I was out of my head and into my body, which allowed me to process and allowed me to feel the things I needed to feel. would I be able to achieve the same benefits doing urban hikes? So we went and we hiked 220 miles around Chicago, and it was the same thing like what you were saying. I was like, we got to talk to everybody. We had like 50 people come out and join us for that hike, which like doesn't sound like a lot compared to the big corporate numbers that I'm used to pulling in my previous chapters, where it's not a success unless thousands of people show up and then an arena is sold out. But like 50 people is not bad. Like I was like, oh my, look at us. Like and that was like total throughout the whole trip. Like at some points we were rolling like 20 something deep, just walking around Chicago. People are like, what are you doing? We're like, we're on a trail, we're hiking. And they're like, you're in the city, you're walking. It's like, is there a difference? Like there's so much education that can happen that by the time you get out to someplace like rugged and wild and remote, you got to want to be there. So like, there's not like the people that are there. We all have, it's one of the beautiful things about spending time in remote wilderness is like, we all have something in common. We have a desire to have this experience. Whereas with urban, we could just be walking and we could change lives just by existing. Like that's a really powerful thing too. So I just wanted to like call out and thank you for the advocacy that you've done and the way that you articulate the experience about the difference between remote and urban hiking, because that opened my eyes to what was possible. And as a community that year in 2021, we hiked more than 54,000 miles for diabetes awareness. And most of those people weren't going to national parks. Most of those people were doing like a lap around their neighborhood or a walk down to the city park. And there's something to be said for having more of these conversations and finding the language to articulate, but also having the breadth of experience to be able to compare. Because if I didn't know rugged, remote, then I wouldn't have that deep appreciation for what is possible when it's just you and bears and mooses and all the other things that like want to hurt you, or they don't want to hurt you. They just don't want you to be in their way. And then on the flip side of that, like if I had only ever done like urban stuff, I might have never thought about what was possible in a remote setting. So I love having the breadth of experience, and I love that you've made it so easy to understand why urban hiking is hiking. And I think by the sheer fact of you doing what you do in this space, we're removing some of the gates that are keeping people out from having these experiences. Because for a lot of folks that we met in 2021, they're like, I'm not hiking. I'm like, yeah, you are. Are you walking for pleasure? Like, are you walking to explore? Then you're hiking. Like, it doesn't matter if it's concrete or trail. It doesn't matter if it's a mountain or a city block. Like, if you're like for me, a hike is a walk with intention. It's not necessarily from one place to another. Like, sure, you got to get to where you're going on the trail, but it's not like walking in town to the convenience store to me is not an urban hike. To me, an urban hike is like with the intent to explore the way I intend to explore the wilderness. For folks that are out there that are like, well, hot dog, I never really thought about that. And now maybe I could feel included in this community of hikers. Like, how do you define urban hiking? How do you define hiking at all? Like, you've hiked 20,000 miles. If you had to guess, do you know the split of where those miles have been achieved, like urban versus like remote and rugged?
Yeah, I mean, the 20,000 counting is probably mostly on it's probably like 19,000, 1,000 as far as urban. I have done 14 urban through hikes, but like 250 miles in a city that's 7 by 7 miles long is pretty good. But I think, one of the things that I talk about a lot about is hiking is walking with intention, with a sense of exploration, just as you said. And I think that it's when we put our minds into an openness to explore, an openness to go someplace we haven't been before, an openness to maybe even go someplace where we might not feel the most comfortable. That's kind of where like something happens in the mind where something clicks, and it allows ourselves to get to a spot of perspective in our lives.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Like I just love I love the way you answer questions, because you're like so succinct and you always end it on like this banging sentence that makes me think, because I'm like, I know where I think she's going. And then she's like, no, I'm done. That's all I have to say. I was like, I would explain 9,000 things to make sure that people understand my point, but that's my business. So I admire how grounded you are in what you do, how you do it, how you share about it, and your intention behind it. And I know that I had said what I think hiking is, but I love, just by the nature of how you exist in the world, you're welcoming others from all walks of life, from every kind of capacity to have an adventure, to do that and to define it for themselves. And I think the way that your path has unfolded just speaks to that without even speaking of it. When we think about, if we kind of bring this back to the topic of the show, the title of the show, Wellness in the Wilderness, much like how I think hiking is a walk with intention, and I love the addition of like with the intent to explore. I also think that wilderness carries a lot of weight, positive or negative. Like the idea of wilderness, like we talk about it as if humans have not lived here for 8, 10, 12 thousands of years, like that this hasn't previously been occupied by people who have stewarded this land so beautifully before we came and ruined it. So I also want to say, like, just with a blanket disclaimer, wilderness for me, similar to the wider definition of hiking, like wilderness for me is a place that you haven't been before. And that doesn't mean that other people have never existed there. But it's allowing yourself to kind of step into an explorer role, leading with curiosity in whatever space that is. And for me, like, I think one of the reasons why I love urban hiking and the concept of setting out on an adventure and not just like walking around town, again, like creating a route or finding a thing, or creating, maybe you're going on an urban, what'd you do, like a taco hike? Like, what? I need to be your friend. That's so cool.
Yes.
Like we need to go on a taco hike. But like for me, like the wilderness of Chicago, like I lived in Chicago for a bit. And I saw more of that city in the 20 days that I was walking around it than I did in the 2 years that I lived there. So for me, like to kind of back out on wellness in the wilderness, like wellness is whatever makes you feel good, however you feel like your best, most healthiest, supported, expressed, alive, accepted self. Wilderness is whatever you make it, a place you'd like to go see that maybe you haven't been there before, but also kind of tapping into the wilderness within us. Like that's something we've really been leaning in on at Hiking My Feelings since I like found the language to articulate the experience I've been trying to verbalize, which is the world has all this stuff out here and we've got a lot of the stuff in here. And the more that we recognize the patterns that are mirroring each other, the more holistic, I think, and the more grounded our experience can be. So with all of that said, and taking all of your experiences into consideration, what helps you feel well in whatever kind of wilderness you're traversing through? And I'd love to hear, like, maybe that's like a couple tips for thru hikers, because like wellness on a thru hike in the rugged remote is very different from like wellness on a taco hike through LA. So like, let's kind of divide those up and let us know what brings you wellness in your versions of the wilderness.
Yeah. I would say, first of all, I would say, like there's wilderness on an urban trail, there's wilderness on a more traditional hiking trail, and there's the wilderness of everyday life. And I think one of the things that I use across all three of them is I'm really big on routines and, like hydration, essential. No matter which of those trails you're hiking, really paying attention to like, are my needs being met as far as like, am I warm enough? Am I too hot? Are bugs bothering me? How are my feet? Very important across urban and wilderness hikes. So I think, that sort of self-care, self-monitoring, being self-aware of our feelings, and also knowing when not to push it too much. I think knowing limitations is really important as well. And I think on any trail, especially a long distance trail, we got to remember, and life, the long distance trail of life, we got to remember, like, we're in this for a really, really long time. So that's awesome that I can go 100% and give it my all. But maybe giving it 100%, giving it your all every single day, every single minute is not actually what I need.
Yeah. And if we're talking about inner wilderness and outer wilderness, like something that it wasn't until so after our 2021 campaign for Take a Hike Diabetes, that year was the year I've hiked the most that I've recorded, at least that I am aware of in my life, which was like 1100 miles. And I was like, oh my God, I am such a beast. This is insane. And then that was also the first year that I had experienced a literal winter in forever since I left Kansas. I did like one winter in Chicago, but on like the more like metaphorical sense of winter, like taking a rest period. And it felt like I felt like, oh, I hiked over 1,000 miles this year. I've earned this rest. And it's like, we don't have to earn rest. But I think that there's something really beautiful about sinking into the seasons. And to your point of not doing everything all the time full out, like we can't go full gas like it's summer year round. Like, and this year in particular, and I don't know if it's like the snowpack in the Sierras or, and how that's kind of pushed out our timeline on some of our programs this summer up in Sequoia National Park, just waiting for the snow to melt. But like this year, the first 5 months on the island were absolutely tornado season for me. Like not even spring, summer, winter, fall. Like it was just tornado season. I felt like a tornado and a hurricane plus an earthquake all wrapped up into one. But it's like this year so far right now, like I keep feeling like we're on the brink of summer. Like solstice just happened. Like we are in summer. It is here. But with my proximity to the Sierras and like my working in and within that range this year, like I feel like it's just not there yet. And it feels like a lot of hurry up and wait. Do you have any suggestions or any personal experience you could share for folks that are feeling like, oh God, Liz just told me I don't have to give full gas all the time. Now what? Like, how do you personally adjust from go to like bringing it down and like kind of settling into a different season of life?
Yeah, that can be difficult. For me, I think completely unplugging, which is sometimes hard, it helps a lot. As I mentioned earlier, I was just hiking in Scotland, and there are places that have reception, Wi-Fi in Scotland, and I was just like, you know what? I'm going to make a commitment to myself to not turn my phone on for any purpose other than like taking a photo for the next 10 days. And that was a scary thing to let go, but I feel so much more refreshed. And when I'm on a wilderness, on a traditional wilderness hike, the way we've set up our cell towers kind of naturally does that for me. But I think to have to make it a choice and then just roll with it, that was really hard. And I think it paid off.
Yeah, it sounds like it did. So before we wrap up, do you have any takeaways or any moments from Scotland that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, going back to this idea of like what is an urban trail, what is wilderness, like when I was in school, I read this book called Wilderness in the American Mind that talks about a lot about like how Americans think about like what wilderness with a capital W means. And being in Scotland and hiking through areas that have been that have been populated for 10,000 years, and your trail is an old Roman road, and sometimes it's a bike trail, and sometimes it's a Forest Service path, and everyone is just like, yeah, that's what hiking is, going through a town. It's a very different conception of how we think about hiking than here, where it's like, got to be a national park where I can't see any cell towers and can't see any farm ruins, or old forts or whatever. So I think, the more ways that we get out and explore and move our bodies, the more we can kind of think of like hiking is just like a way of life that can teach us things, and can create space for us to learn things about ourselves and about others, and less about like, this is the best type of hiking.
I love that because they're like, at the end of the day, I was thinking about this the other day as I was like turning around on Mount Olympus up in Salt Lake City. We made a big list of hikes we wanted to do when we were in OR or out there for Outdoor Retailer. And we were like, let's just get this first big one out of the way and we'll just like adjust after that. Never mind that I was on a beach in San Diego 36 hours prior. And I'm thinking like, oh, like going up to like 6, 7, 8, 9 grand. Like that's not a big deal. It's not 14ers. Like I'll be fine. I got 2.5 miles into this sucker. And I was like, either there's two things that are true. My body was like, no, you were at sea level for the previous 5 months up until like 36 hours ago. We need to slow down. But also like I had just been like, I hadn't really created the space I needed for a big fat cry. And so I just needed that to happen. And I got up to this, like, I got like 2.5 miles into this thing and I was like, nope, this ain't for me. And the thoughts that followed immediately after listening to my body were so egregious and so disrespectful of all the work that I've done. Because I was like, well, surely this means the end of this experience. This means the end of my business. Like, because I use hiking as a metaphor, sometimes to a fault, where I'm like, okay, building a business, that's a hike. Would I turn around on hiking my feelings? No, I wouldn't. I would keep charging one foot in front of the other. Yeah, sure. I'd take a rest and I'd eat and I'd go take a dip in a lake and I'd do all the things that make building this fun. But like at the end of the day, I don't turn around on this. My marriage. Do I turn around on my marriage? No. Like I keep putting one foot in front of the other. And so I was doing this hike and I was like, because I hold hiking as this metaphor that's like, it's almost become my personality that like I just keep putting one foot in front of the other because I'm a survivor. I don't give up. And I'm just like, this is dumb. Like, I don't want to be on this trail anymore. So like when it comes to kind of like weaving all these things back together, when it comes to trusting yourself, when it comes to being able to let things go, because it sounds like if you didn't have all the experiences that you had and you were in Scotland and you hadn't already arrived at the realization of your weaknesses and hired to supplement those, it sounds like you wouldn't have even had the capacity to go to this trip, let alone to do it disconnected. So if there's one thing that we could take away from everything that you've experienced, if there was just like somebody out there that's like, you know what I need like a quick blurb about why I should trust myself and why hiking is a great place to build that trust. Do you got anything along those lines, like some parting words for folks that can help them step into the next chapter of, I don't know, maybe like self-belief? Because what I'm hearing when I hear about your adventures, I've asked 7 questions in this very long sentence, so I'll nail it down with one at the end because I'm thinking out loud. But like what I'm hearing and all the dots that we're connecting here on your particular experience, urban, rugged, remote, trusting yourself, hiring for things that you suck at or you don't like doing. Like, what is the mechanism that inspires you to keep putting one foot in front of the other?
Yeah, I think, I've tried different things like society's expectations or like what people will think of me or what my mom wants me to do or what I'm supposed to do according to my teachers. And the only thing that really works for me is following joy. And when I follow joy, when I follow a purpose, even when things are temporarily hard, when there's a thunderstorm and my feet hurt or like trying to make ends meet in business or whatever, it feels like there's a purpose and it's like, okay, this is going to pass. I know this is like really difficult right now and I'm having trouble sleeping, but it's going to be over and it's going to be worth it. So I think looking for the small joy and following the big joy is like the only thing that ever really feels right.
I love that. And yes, because, and for anybody that's listening where you're like, I don't know her. Like I haven't felt joy in months or years or decades. And for folks that are like, purpose, where do you find that? Do you get it at the store? I think what Liz is saying and what I'll echo is when you can find something that brings you as much joy, and maybe it's hiking, like clearly for Liz and I, it's hiking. But if you can find something that just gives you that unfettered sense of joy or peace or acceptance or feeling included, even if you're all alone on a trail or wherever you're at. Like find the thing that brings you joy and then like really lean into it, because through that you'll be able to discover your purpose. Because like I don't think that joy, the things that bring you joy might not be your purpose, but the things that bring you joy could point you in the right direction of it. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would definitely agree. And I would also add, like, for us, hiking is a great way to find our joy, but I would also say, like, go try a whole bunch of random things. Go try dancing and volleyball and like pottery or whatever, and see what brings you joy. And you don't have to take more than a couple classes to be like, yep, this is really like sparking something, or like, nope, I'm going to move on to the next thing. I think as adults, that's not something that naturally we think about doing. It's like, let's go try out a whole bunch of new hobbies. But I totally agree that there's something about doing something new or going someplace new that just kind of like gets our mind like, oh, I could do this, or like maybe this is my purpose. It just kind of like rewires everything in there.
Yeah, I like that too. And on the note of trying things differently, like a reflection that I'll offer before we start wrapping things up here. Like for my best example, my intro into my joy was deciding that it was okay for me to buy a camera and use it, because the story I had been telling myself was that my dad's a photojournalist, my sister's a photographer. There's not room for another. Never mind that there's like literal millions of cameras sold every year. Like for whatever reason, I was excluded, and I picked up a camera. And while like photography is a big part of what we do now, it is not by any stretch one of my favorite. I don't even consider it a hobby. It's so ingrained in what I do and how I document and how I remember. But that single moment where I was like, oh, I could, like, I'm not excluded from having this experience. I'm going to try it. And then I was like, because I was like, I was coming from spreadsheet and corporate marketing land, I was like, oh my God, I'm a creative. Never mind that I've been writing my entire life and that is art in and of itself. I was like, oh my God, I'm creative. Well, what else do creative people do? They take improv classes. So I took 4 improv classes. Like I went through 4 levels of improv study at the school that I studied at. And I didn't go there, like, obviously, like if I happened to end up on a like cast of Saturday Night Live with no real effort or experience, I would have welcomed that for me. But like, I didn't go there with the intent of being famous. I didn't go there with the intent of learning how to do improv, and the improv was like now my career path. I just wanted to try something new. And in doing so, I met one of my greatest teachers, Gary Ware, who like really helped me reframe life. And through the art of improv and through the power of yes and just like understanding what it means to play, then hiking had a whole new layer to it. Because then I was like, oh, okay, well, if this is true, what else is true? If this is possible, what else is possible? And it was through that kind of thinking that started with picking up a camera because I didn't think I could, and then signing up for classes that I had no intention of like completing to graduation, that I was introduced to enough things where I could realize what brought me joy. Because like the reality of the situation is the world we live in is hard. It always has been. It always will be. I have this vision of a utopia where we all just like sit around, we go for hikes, we cook the food that lives in our garden, and like there's no violence, there's no hate, there's no whatever. But then I think back on history, because we all have like selective amnesia. And in every society, there has always been healers, there have always been doctors or some kind of somebody like that. And there have always been warriors that go out to kill the people that are trying to come get what we got. That my version of utopia, I don't think ever will exist. But what does exist is that feeling of wholeness, of support, of community within myself and in the outdoors, in the spaces that I occupy. So if nothing else, do what Liz said. Go try something new. Go do it. Like anything that you love doing as a kid, that's a great place to start. Like go play outside, go swing on the swings, and then pay attention to the thoughts that come up, because that might stir something cool. Liz, what are you working on right now? You've got Treeline Review. Do you have any cool hiking projects? Are you working on other books? Like what's in the pipeline for you and all the things you care about?
Yeah, definitely. So Treeline Review, definitely a very big part of my life. We have some really cool stories coming out soon. One is about tips for thru hiking as an LGBTQ hiker, which is something that we haven't seen a lot of information about, and especially in light of the current political situation, very important work. As far as other things that I've got doing, I'm actually going to be up in the Sierra as well for the next month, and I'm going to be teaching a workshop on appreciating the environment around us and also writing about our experiences as we're outdoors. So I'm working with college students. I'm really excited about doing that and living up there for a month. And then I'm going out with the really great Confluence Collective group. At the beginning of August to, as we were talking about trying new things, I would also like to add one thing about trying new things. It's okay if I'm not good.
Yeah. If we suck, it's fine.
Totally okay to suck. What matters is like, am I having fun? So fly fishing, something I suck at, but I like being out on the water, and that's what matters. And then I'm also doing a trip in August with a reunion trip with some of my friends from the PCT. And I think I'm really, really looking forward to that because we haven't backpacked together since the PCT.
Oh, I love that.
And one of my friends is a mom now, and it's just like, we're in different places in our life, but I think the trail teaches us the importance of these sort of, it creates deep friendships. It creates space to really be ourselves. Mm-hmm. And, it doesn't matter that we live thousands of miles away from each other. Like, we made this trip happen.
Yes. Oh, well, if for no other reason, get outside because it gives us the space to be ourselves. I'm ending it there. All right. Where can people stay in touch? How can they follow along? Where is Liz living online?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram at Liz Thomas Hiking, also Facebook, Liz Thomas Hiking. And you can always see what I'm up to at Treeline Review, which is at Treeline Review on Instagram and also on Facebook.
Awesome.
And treelinereview.com.
Yay. Liz, thank you so much for making the time to spend with us today and sharing how you find your wellness in the wilderness. Until next time, I hope everybody here has found this conversation to be a breath of fresh air. Be good to yourself, be good to each other, live the best life you possibly can, whatever that looks like for you, and go find your joy, damn it. We need more of that in the world. Until next time, we'll see you later.
Sawyer is more than an outdoor company. Every Sawyer product you buy contributes to our common humanity, bringing Sawyer water filtration systems to people in need all around the world. In just 2022 alone, 260,000 households in over 45 countries received clean drinking water through Sawyer filters. Over the past 10 years, we've teamed up with over 140 charities in 80 countries to provide long-term, sustainable relief, domestically, internationally, and in disaster situations. Together, we're saving millions of lives. Thank you.
Ready to find your wellness in the wilderness? Look no further than Hiking My Feelings. Through a combination of community and self-discovery, our programs are designed to give you the space and support to connect life's dots. If you're looking to figure out who you are underneath the stories you've been given and are ready to redesign the map of where you're headed with actionable steps and opportunities to dream big, we're here to walk alongside you. Whether you're a seasoned adventure enthusiast or brand new to the healing power of nature, we've got your back. Visit hikingmyfeelings.org today to download our free Trail Thoughts worksheets and learn more about Hiking My Feelings. Thanks for joining us on this week's show. We hope this episode has been a breath of fresh air for you and has inspired you to find your wellness in the wilderness. We will reconnect with nature and you again next week.